Well, good evening, everyone. The time is 7 o'clock Eastern time, and that means it is time for us to start our GMAT Math Refresher workshop. So welcome, and thanks for sharing more information about yourself. Now, the way this class is going to work, I'd like for this class to be very practical, because I'm hoping that you're going to walk away with the strategies that you could use right away to help you prepare for the GMAT. And how we're going to do this, we'll do a couple of things over the next 2 hours. Firstly, we will look at some GMAT questions just so you can, first of all, get a taste of what the GMAT is like and learn some of the practical strategies that you could use right away to do these types of questions. We'll also talk about how do you actually study for the test? How do you prepare? What kinds of resources could you use? How could you structure your studies to get to a 700 plus score if that is the score that you would like to get over the next 2 to 3 months or whatever your timeline is like? Towards the end of our workshop, we are going to hear from our guest speaker. Anna Brochet is a manager of recruitment from the John Molson School of Business, who is going to share with you some of the very valuable strategies about how you can prepare your MBA application, because MBA applications are not just about the GMAT. So that's what we're going to do over the next 2 hours. But I'd like to start by taking you a little outside of your comfort zone. And the reason why we'll do this, and you may have heard this analogy or certainly seen or are familiar with the concept of a comfort zone. Well, one interesting thing about the comfort zone is just beyond the comfort zone, there's learning zone. So whenever we want to learn something, we do need to get slightly uncomfortable, but perhaps not too much, just a little. So that's what I'm hoping we're going to do with this next question. So just so you can actually get into that learning zone. So I'm going to show you a question, which is a GMAT question, a question with 5 answer choices. And I'm going to launch a very quick poll here. So you'll see a poll that you can actually answer that question in a window that's going to pop up. I'm going to give you approximately 45 seconds or so to work on that question, and then we'll discuss that question. So here is the question, and you'll see that window in just a moment. So you can do anything you want with this question, just please don't use a calculator. I'll give you 10 more seconds. So if you haven't chosen the answer yet, just please choose the answer that looks the best to you. All right, so let me stop you right here. Let me share the results with you. So as you could see by the majority vote, the right answer is D. We'll figure out in a moment if that is indeed the right answer. So let me reveal the right answer to you. Drum roll, please. And the right answer is D. So the question is, how did we get to D without using the calculator? What is it that we needed to know in order to answer this question? Well, first of all, we needed to know what is an exponent. And in this specific example, 7 to the power of 3 simply means 7 times 7 times 7. Now, I'm sure that at some point you've learned some powers of small numbers, but you may not have learned the powers of 7. That's completely okay. And I have asked you not to use a calculator, and I hope that you didn't, just because this is not something you can use on a test. But this is not a very difficult number to calculate, because 7 times 7 happens to be 49. Now, if you're familiar with shortcut calculations, 49 is almost 50. If we were to multiply 7 by 50, we're going to get 350. And of course, we're multiplying 49, not 50, so we need to subtract a 7 from that 350, and we'll get to 343. That is something you can do in your head. That's certainly something you can do in your notepad fairly quickly. What else did we need to know for that question? Well, we also needed to know, of course, how to multiply and divide. Well, in this specific example, how to multiply 7 over 7 and how to divide that thing then by 5. And then finally, we needed to understand what is the remainder, because if we take that number 343 and we divide it by 5, of course, it is not divisible by 5. 340 would be divisible by 5. That's the closest smaller number to 343. What is left as a result of this division? 3 would be the remainder that would be left. So that's how we can answer this question. Now, the question then becomes, is this really what is to the GMAT? Is the GMAT going to get any more complicated than this? Good news and bad news here. And the good news, when it comes to the basic math theory, it doesn't really get much more complicated than this. Because according to the GMAT, which is the organization that makes the test, you need to know not more than what's generally taught in secondary school classes. Now, you may have heard or maybe read in a book that the GMAT tests high school math, so there isn't anything from the university. But according to the GMAT, it's actually the secondary school where most of the theory is coming from. There's a very, very small number of concepts from the high school, but the majority of them are from grades 5 to 8. So what actually was tested or what was taught to us in secondary school? Some arithmetic, essentially number properties, things just what we've just done. Some elementary algebra, and we're talking about linear algebra and perhaps a little bit of quadratics, as well as some commonly known geometry concepts. So fairly basic things. All right. Well, then, if that's the case, if we're now pretty comfortable with what's an exponent, how to multiply and divide, and what's a remainder, let's do another question. That's actually going to look very similar to the question we've just done, but we'll make it a little more challenging the way that the GMAT will make it a little more challenging. And I am going to still ask you to not use the calculator, so you can only use pen and paper if you wish. Please don't Google this question either. Just use whatever you know and whatever you've just learned with perhaps your notepad to try to get to an answer. And I'm going to give you another minute or so. Here's the question. I'll give you 10 more seconds. So if you haven't chosen the answer yet, please choose it right now. And it doesn't really matter if you get this question right. It's okay. We'll presume that there are no right and wrong answers here in this class. All right, I'm going to end this voting right now. Let me share the results with you. So as you could see by the majority vote, D is again the right answer. Now, you may have noticed that the number was slightly different. We started in the first question with the remainder of 7 to the power of 3, but now we have 7 to the power of 13. So would the answer be the same or would it be different? Well, let's find out. Now, there are a few ways of dealing with this question, and one of the ways could be perhaps to do exactly what we've just done. Let's call it the theory way, or the more straightforward or the high school way. And that is, well, we could technically go ahead and calculate 7 to the power of 13. By the way, this would be the answer. And then if we were to divide it by 5, we are going to actually get a remainder of 2. Now, we could do that, but there is a problem. And the problem is we do not have a calculator. So for us to multiply 7 onto itself 13 times might take a while. And we don't have that time on a test day. I've given you about 1 minute and 45 seconds. That's definitely not more than what you should be doing on a test day. So perhaps there is a different way of doing this question. Let's call it the mastery way. This is when we've learned some of the strategies that will help us do things faster on the test. Now, in order for us to talk about that way, I have to teach you a strategy first. You may not have seen this strategy before, you may have, but there is a strategy that's called the units digit strategy. So what does it mean, the units digit? Well, the units digit is the number that's at the very end of an integer. We call it the units digit. For example, if I have the first number here has a units digit of 6, and the second number has a units digit of 7. That's the digit at the end, just before the decimal point. And in the integer, that's the last digit. Well, if I were to actually go ahead and multiply these numbers, there's a certain process that I would follow. I would first multiply 6 by 7, and I'm going to get 42. And then I'm going to take the 4, I'll carry it over to the next digit, which we call the tens digit. And then we'll continue carrying the numbers over and continue multiplying until we're actually done with this operation. Now, it might take a while, we have to be careful. But what's interesting is that the 2 at the very end is not going to be affected by whatever we do from now. Because we'll always carry forward the digits to the next digit, the tens, the hundreds, and so on, but we won't ever carry back. So the 2 is going to stay. And that's really the essence of that units digit strategy, is that we can really quickly find the last digit, which is called the units digit. And because the GMAT is a multiple choice exam, very often this is all that we need to do. And this strategy works with any multiplication, addition, and even with subtraction. With subtraction, we have to be careful because sometimes we need to borrow. So for example, if we were to subtract the second number from the first, the answer is actually not 1, it would be 9. But for addition, multiplication, it's very straightforward. Well, how is this helpful here in this question? 7 to the power of 13 is nothing but multiplication of 7 onto itself 13 times. And perhaps instead of multiplying it and using this strategy, we can see if we can notice some sort of a pattern here. Well, let's start with 7 to the power of 1, which is 7 just once. That, of course, will give us a 7. And, of course, the last digit is 7. That's the only one. If we were to multiply 7 onto itself the second time, we're going to get 49. Now, because we only care about the last digit, we'll just take a 9 and we'll keep going. Now, if we multiply it onto 7 one more time, we already know we've done this in the previous question. We're going to get that 9 at the end multiplied by 7, and we'll get 63. Again, we only care about the 3. I hope you're enjoying this operation because it's so easy. You just multiply the numbers, take the last digit, and don't do anything else. I find it fascinating. That's really this kind of math that I want to do in the GMAT. Now we'll do it one more time, 7 to the power of 4. So now we have a number that ends in a 3. 3 times 7, that's 21. Again, we take only the last digit. So we know that 7 to the power of 4 is going to end with a number 1. Okay, well, let's keep going. We're not quite done yet. We have to go to 7 to the 13, maybe. Well, 7 to the 5 is now going to give us 1 at the end. That's what we had in 7 to the 4, and we'll multiply it by 7 again. Well, 1 times 7 is simply 7. And what you might notice then at this point, that gives us exactly the same number at the end as 7 to the power of 1. And of course, if we were to now keep multiplying this onto 7, the numbers are just going to cycle through this same pattern, 7, 9, 3, and 1. And we get a 7 again, we keep multiplying, we're going to get 9, 3, and 1 again. So we see a pattern here, and this pattern repeats every 4 powers. What this also means is that if we keep going, once we get to 7 to the power of 12, which is divisible by 4, we'll end up at the very end of this pattern. So the last digit of 7 to the power of 12, just like 7 to the power of 4, was 1. But we need 7 to the 13. And of course, if we multiply 1 by 7, we'll get a 7. So what we've just discovered is that 7 to the power of 13 is ending in a 7. If the number ends in a 7, and we divide it by 5, we know that the remainder is going to be 2. So the answer is C. And we can do this much faster. Because instead of actually calculating the number, we just did a very simple operation. We noticed the pattern, and we were very strategic about what we've done. So the answer is C, and we can do this faster. And that brings us to an important point about the GMAT, and that is what really separates somebody who would get a score of 500 from somebody who would get a score of, let's say, 700, which is what most people want on the GMAT. Well, I think you've kind of seen it already. The second question was actually much harder than the first one because we needed to know something else. And the GMAT, again, the organization that actually makes the test, have actually explained to us exactly what we need. So let's ask them. Here's what they say. This is a quote directly from the MBA.com website. It says, rather than testing your knowledge of business or any other subject matter, and this is actually important. Most people don't pay attention to this. What this tells us is that the GMAT is not like a normal traditional college or university level exam. Most of these exams, I don't know about you, but certainly for me, most of the exams that I've done in the university, I had to learn some content, and the exam was testing me how well I know that content. So if I go for a chemistry exam, well, I better know some chemistry. Well, the GMAT is going to be different. Instead, it's not evaluating how well we know business. It's not even evaluating how well we know math. Instead, it's trying to evaluate how well we can reason on a higher level. Because these reasoning skills is really what matters in the MBA program and in the workplace. And when Kumio comes in at the end of this workshop, she's going to use the word skills a lot because many business schools would consider your GMAT preparation to be like the first MBA course because it actually prepares you. It helps you develop some of the skills that are going to help you do well in the MBA program. And of course, who said this? The GMAT, people who created the test. So that's a fundamental shift from how we're used to learning. Because when we grew up, and again, I can speak about me and you might relate to this, I was told by my high school teachers that knowledge is power. So if I learned that history lesson or that biology, when I grow up, I'll be powerful and successful. That's what they told me. And I like analogies, so I'm going to give you an analogy of how that strategy really works. Well, if you and I were deciding to learn how to swim, we can read a book on swimming and we can get all the knowledge about swimming, or we can actually jump into a pool and start swimming. And Well, if we don't know how to swim, if we jump into a pool that could be dangerous, we can even drown. So we need to learn the skill of swimming. And ideally, I want to learn the skill by watching somebody swim. Then I want to learn how to swim perhaps by going into a pool that's fairly shallow. And as I'm learning, I want to build up my skill. And I'm hopefully going to get some feedback as I continue developing the skill. Because if I want to be in that top 10%, which is necessary to get a score of 700, I better get really good at swimming. So just reading the book's not going to be enough. I need to practice a lot, and I need to actually keep building up the skill of doing the test. And I'll show you the exact strategy of how this works. And as you begin studying, if you study that way, developing a skill, you would notice that sometimes you look at a very difficult question and you might not even know how to deal with it mathematically, but you got the right skills to analyze the question and to tackle the question, and that's all that you need. You know, sometimes I fight when I do tutoring, I fight with some of my students that say, I need to know the proper mathematical way of doing the question. And the problem is that that proper mathematical way of a question might actually take 10 minutes. There might not be a quicker way of doing it mathematically, but there's a much quicker way of doing it by using your reasoning skills. And that's what we're going to keep practicing this all throughout this workshop. Now, developing a skill is actually harder than reading a book because it takes time. And initially, we're not good at a skill. If we learn how to swim, at first, we're not really good at swimming. So we need to be really committed to developing this skill. And that's why I'd like to just invite you to think about how this whole journey fits into your personal goals. If you are thinking about the next step in your career and what's really important about that next step in your career, and perhaps why is it so important for you to do the MBA or a master's degree? How's your life going to be different if you have a master's degree? Perhaps you can make a difference in the world or in your community, or perhaps you can make more money, or perhaps you can move to a new country. Well, if you think about this as an important step in your career, and you also really understand why is it so important and what's it going to give you on that personal level, then as we go through the information tonight, you're going to see how it very closely relates to you achieving that goal. And that helps you really stay motivated to achieving this goal. And then I'll give you some interesting numbers that I think are going to make you ponder a little bit about what statistically is the success rate on the GMAT and people achieving their goals. So over the next little while, I'll share these strategies with you. And I just wanted to really quickly show you my score report just so that you could see what kind of qualifies me to share some of these strategies with you. And I'm not showing this score report to you to impress you. It actually honestly impresses me because I was able to get this with very little preparation. And what I've discovered after I've done my MBA, as I met a lot of people who did also very well on the GMAT and some of the people who really struggled on the GMAT, is I found that usually the way that they prepared for the test really made all the difference. And for me, sometimes people ask me, how long did you prepare for the GMAT? And I usually say, well, I prepared for a couple of weeks. But really the honest answer is I've been preparing for the GMAT for much longer because I was very lucky that in my high school and in my university, I was working on a lot of the skills that are actually very relevant to the GMAT. So if you heard of anybody who can just walk into a test center and get a very good score, I know we all hate these people, they probably were just fortunate enough to have the good teachers that taught them these skills. What I actually found, as I've done my MBA and as I started actually teaching the GMAT at some point, working for another company, what I found is that there was really something that made people succeed on the GMAT, regardless of their background. And that was really that thinking differently, thinking on a different level. And at that time, I really started networking with a lot of instructors, and I met some of the instructors who were really like super, super experienced, worked for a very long time, for many years. Some of them wrote some of the books If you go on Amazon, actually, you're going to find 2 books that were written by our instructors when they used to work at other companies. One of them was an independent book that was written by one of our instructors. What I've discovered is that almost every GMAT course was teaching the strategies and the theory. Most are teaching the theory, some were teaching the strategies, but no classes were actually teaching people how to think. And that was the missing piece. So we got together a number of years ago, about 10 or 12 years ago, and we've developed a program that we call the GMAT Mastery, which is really all about learning how to think on a different level. In fact, I wanted to show you a quote just from one of our recent students. Her name is Daria. She came to our program in March of this year, March or April. And her diagnostic score was 380. But she really needed a high score because she wanted to get into a master's program, Master of Finance. And generally for this program, you do need a score of 700 or above. So most people are going to get demotivated when they get the diagnostic score. But for her, she really needed to know what's important to her. And she wanted to do that degree. And she was really, really committed. And she took the time for, she took the time to study for about 3 months. Our course was 6 weeks, and then she studied for 7 more weeks, and she managed the score of 700 by just following our program. And I wanted to show this to you because in her quote, notice how she says, I learned how to think outside the box. I learned how to manage my time, how to manage my stress, how to think like a CEO. This is the framework that we use in our course, which is really just a different way to approach the questions. Most people approach the questions the way that the high school student would approach. But if you come to our class, we're going to teach you how to approach a question the way that a senior manager or CEO of a company would approach this question. Right? And of course, the instructor supported her along the way. And I actually was just speaking with Daria 2 days ago. She got an offer from her dream school, which is the London Business School, and she's going there next September. So that was a really good news story. And it was really all about being committed, being open-minded, and taking the steps to learn how to think differently, right? So that's what I'm hoping you're gonna walk away with, and I'll give you the exact strategy that Daria followed as a step-by-step process so you could follow it as well. So today, as I mentioned, we started with a question to challenge you a little bit to get outside of a comfort zone. We talked about that one skill that separates the 500 and 700 plus scores, and that was really the skill of thinking differently. I'll share with you a few more practical strategies, but I also want to make sure that you can walk away having a plan. You didn't just come here to get the information. I want you to have a plan. And with this plan, you'll be able to know exactly how to study, and also you'll be able to know exactly when you're ready. I'll share with you these 2 things that by the end of your studies, if you feel that you have these 2 things, you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to do well on a test. And if one of them is missing, then the test might not go well. I know many of us are studying at home right now, so I'll share with you some of the strategies you can use to study at home. And of course, towards the end, we'll have some time for Q&A and with some bonuses as well. And we'll hear then from Kumio about the application process. So if you have any questions as we go on, if your question can wait, or if it's more personal question, please put it in the Q&A box. And if this is a question that will help us interact, please put it in the chat box. And I have a couple of colleagues that are going to help answer these questions as well. Now, we talked about the skill, and really this is the theme of tonight's class. It's all about developing new skill, but how is the GMAT actually testing them? Well, if you look at the structure of the test, you would notice there are 4 sections, and 2 of these sections, quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning, contribute towards the total 200 to 800 score. If you do decide to take this test online, which is a format that's available right now due to the COVID pandemic, you will not have to write the essay, but you will still need to do the rest of the exam, the other 3 sections, and there will be only 1 break, and it's going to be shorter, only 5 minutes. Notice again, if you look at the structure here of the test, and if you look at the names of the section, you would notice that most people, when they call these sections, they would say, oh, there's a math section, there's a verbal section. Most people call it the English section, and I need to know some vocabulary. Well, I think what, especially if you've been studying a little bit, you already know by now, it's not about knowing the vocabulary. It's not really about math. Notice how the word reasoning here is very common in these names. And even in the first section, which is an essay, the word analytical is actually a very important word. So the GMAT actually tells us, we are going to evaluate your analytical and your reasoning abilities. That's really what the test is about. That's why the test is fairly tricky, not hard, tricky. That's why we need to develop these skills. Now, the online exam, as of right now, is available until the end of February. Assuming that the pandemic is over by end of February, this is going to be the end of the online exam. But if you and I were to predict whether the pandemic is going to be ending by the end of February, we can probably not hold our breath. So chances are the exam will get extended, the online exam. Now, the online exam is available only twice, which means you can take this exam only 2 times. The in-person exam is available up to 5 times per year and a total of 8 times in your lifetime. So the quant and the verbal sections are the most important sections because they do contribute towards the total score. What is it actually that we're going to see on these sections? Well, what we're going to see are the 2 question types in the quant section and 3 question types in the verbal section. Today is all about the quant section. We are going to have another class on the verbal section on January 4th. I know it's hard to believe, but we're 2 weeks away from the New Year's. So our next verbal reasoning class is going to be on Monday, January 4th. Very early in the year, we want to make sure that you really get everything to help you get started in next year. So if you haven't signed up yet, then please, you can go on our website and sign up, and we'll send you a reminder as well. Now, these 2 sections are also computer adaptive. And the verbal refresher on January 4th, we'll talk a little bit more about what does it really mean. But just for the purpose of our discussion today, I just want to tell you that the test is going to adapt its difficulty to your performance. So if you are doing well, if you're answering the questions correctly, the next questions is going to get harder. And if you're answering the questions incorrectly, the next question is going to get easier, right? So the only way to get a high score on the GMAT is to answer a lot of hard questions, a lot of difficult questions. So the questions that you see out of the 31 quant and 36 verbal, not every question is going to have the same weight. Difficult questions have a bigger weight, they count more. But in order to see these difficult questions, we have to deal with easier questions first, answer them correctly, and that's how we see harder questions. And if we keep making mistakes in harder questions, then the difficulty is going to keep dropping again. And that means we might not again get to these hard questions. So essentially what I'm getting with this is that we need to answer a lot of hard questions within a limited time to do well on the test. Sounds like a lot of fun, right? And that is perhaps one of the reasons why the GMAT is difficult and why specifically the math on the GMAT is also difficult. Right? So that's what I hear a lot from people who come to these classes. And I've personally done over 300 of these classes, believe it or not, over the past 10 years. I've done a lot of the in-person classes, a lot of the online classes. And usually especially in the in-person class, I hear a lot of the reasons why math is difficult. In fact, I'd love to hear from you, and thanks for answering right now in that quick poll. I'm going to give you a quick summary of what most people would say, just so that you could perhaps compare it with your answers. And the most popular answer is actually, so far, it's been a while since I've done this sort of math. In fact, for most of us, it's probably been at least 10 years. Because remember, that's secondary school, and most of us graduate from secondary school, oh geez, a while ago, if we're thinking of a graduate program right now. The second most popular answer is time pressure. I get very little time per question. So yes, I can solve the problem. And if you looked at the explanations in some of the online forums or even the official guide, you would notice that some of them take pages. How can I possibly do that in 2 minutes? Easy to make a computational error. Some of you are saying, well, I'm not really a math person. We don't have calculators because right now we are using calculators to do math. So these are all very good reasons. And what makes us hopefully a little more at peace with the GMAT is that despite all of these facts, the GMAT Math is beatable if we learn how to beat it, because it is a standardized test at the end of the day. So it cannot just pull all kinds of tricks on us. It could if we're not ready, but if we know what kinds of tricks it could pull, we can be prepared to deal with these tricks. So let's perhaps look at one more question that's again going to be similar to the question that we've done already. And let's see if we can use some of the skills we've already learned to deal with this question. I'm going to again launch this quick survey so that you could share your answer. I'll give you about a minute. And again, please don't use calculators. Although calculators are not really going to help. This number is so big, it's not going to fit into any calculator. Right, I'll give you 10 more seconds and then we'll talk about this question. If you haven't voted yet, please choose an answer. And even if you're wrong, that's completely okay. There are no right and wrong answers here. All right, I'm going to end the survey right now. So far, as you could see, about half of the people who did vote, and just over half of the people on this call actually voted, and about half of them, so just over a quarter of the people are confident the answer is E. And then look at this nice Christmas tree that we see here in our answers. So how can we approach this question? Well, again, we could use the strategy that we already talked about, let's say the theory way, and that is perhaps what we've already learned, that 10 to the 50 minus 1 will end in a number 9. But the question is, where do we go from there? Just the fact that it ends in a 9 doesn't really help us a lot. So perhaps instead, we can remember, how do we figure out if the number is divisible by 11? Now, if we look in at smaller numbers, such as 33 or maybe 132, it's quite easy to figure out whether it's divisible by 11. But if we look at the more difficult number, the bigger number, then we don't really have just a quick kind of glancing at the number understanding of whether it's divisible by 11. So we need to use what's called the divisibility rule by 11. Now, what we're going to do is we will split the number that way. And essentially, we're going to start with that last digit, which you know by now, it's called the units digit. And we will add all of the digits, skipping one as we go along. So we'll start with the last one, which is 9. We'll skip the 7, we'll add the 8, we'll skip the 1, we'll add the 2, and then we'll keep going. So if the number is longer, that strategy still works. And then, of course, 2 plus 8 plus 9 is going to be 19. Now, we have some numbers left, 1 and 7, so we'll need to add them up as well. 1 plus 7 is going to be 8. If we follow this strategy, then we are going to get two numbers. If we subtract one from the other, we're going to get the difference, and the difference here is going to be number 11. So if we get here a number that's either 11 or 0 or any sort of a multiple of 11, then we know the original number was also a multiple of 11. You may or may not have learned this in high school, but that's how we figure whether a number is divisible by 11. We could use this strategy to answer our question as well. So 10 to the 50 minus 1, that's a number with a lot of nines. The original number had a lot of zeros. Now this is a number with a lot of nines. So let me ask you a question, and I think that's probably going to be important for this question. How many nines are there going to be in this number? Can you please just put things in the chat box? How many nines? 10 to the 50 minus 1. How many nines would we have? Okay, so far, almost everybody is saying we're going to have 49 nines, and a couple of people are saying we're going to have 50 nines. Well, the answer is actually 50. We are going to have 50 nines. So why is it 50? Well, again, we have to teach ourselves some of these skills, some of these tricks. And one of them is, if we're dealing with a big number, perhaps we can look for patterns by using smaller numbers. If we take 10 to the 1 minus 1, we're going to get a 9. So 1, 9. If we get 10 to the 2 minus 1, we're going to get 100 minus 1, which is 99. So it looks like the number of nines is going to always match that power of 10. So now if we were to write this number down, of course we won't need to, but if we were to, we'll end up with 25 red nines and 25 blue nines, so 50 nines in total, right? We start with the last one and we keep skipping one number as we go along. So if we can visualize what we've done before, we're going to have 25 times 9 on the top, 25 times 9 at the bottom. If we subtract one sum from the other, we'll end up simply with a 0. Now that tells us that 10 to the 50 minus 1 is actually divisible by 11 because we get a 0. And we said as long as we get a 0, any sort of a multiple of 11 there as a result of this operation, then that big number is divisible by 11. So if 10 to the 50 minus 1 is divisible by 11, of course, the remainder will have to be 0. So the answer is indeed E. And we can do this as long as we remember our divisibility rule by 11, and as long as we are careful counting the nines, we can do this. And we can do this in 2 minutes. I've given you about 2 minutes, and we can definitely do that during this time. So the question becomes, is there maybe an even different way of doing this question? Could we use more of our reasoning skills and maybe a little bit less math, so that perhaps we can do even less calculation? Well, let's take a look. And after all, it is a quantitative reasoning section. Now, 10 to the 50 minus 1 is a very big number. And perhaps we can look at some of the smaller patterns, just like what we started doing when we talked about that strategy. So 10 to the 1 minus 1, that's going to be a 9. And by the way, the remainder when we divide 9 by 11 is 9. Because how many times does 11 go into 9? Well, it doesn't. It goes 0 times. So what's going to be left of 9 after we divide it by 11? 9. 9 is what's left. 9 is a remainder. All right, well, how about if we take 10 to the 2 minus 1? That's going to give us 99. And 99 is divisible by 11, so the remainder is going to be 0. If we were to keep going and maybe take 10 to the 3 minus 1, which is 999, still a number small enough, and we'll notice that, again, we get a remainder of 9. And 10 to the 4 minus 1, 9999, 9999. It is divisible by 11. Again, we're going to get a remainder of 0. So what we just noticed is that no matter what we do, and even if we're not careful counting the nines, the remainder is always going to be 9 or 0. And by the way, there is no answer choice with the answer 9. So it has to be 0. That's the only answer that still matches. This is a multiple choice exam, so we don't need to find an answer somewhere in the universe. We just need to find the answer among the answer choices. Well, the only two options, 9 and 0. 9 is not there, but 0 is. So that has to be the right answer. And we can literally do this in just 1 minute. So notice how we did even less math, more reasoning. And you can choose based on your level of comfort with math. That's why I mentioned that we have a lot of students who come to our program who are not very strong in math, but they learn how to think differently. They keep an open mind and they're really committed and they do really well on the test. Right? We have some examples of people who got 760 on the GMAT. I remember one of our students got 760 and he was a musician. He was playing in a band. Right? No math background whatsoever. But yet he was able to get this score that's very high because he learned how to think differently about these questions. Now, this was a problem-solving question, but I wanted to show you the question that perhaps is even more conceptual, and that's a data sufficiency question. Now, you may, if you've never seen a data sufficiency question before, don't worry, you're going to see one now. And I'll show you the question and I'll show you what it means. And I'll give you some time to think about this question. But essentially how the question is going to look like, you're going to have a question itself that has some information in it. And don't read it yet. I'll give you some time to do so. And then you have two statements. Now, these statements give you some pieces of information. Now, your job is not really to answer the question. That's not the point. Your job is to figure out if the information in the statements is sufficient to answer the question, right? And in order to understand if it's sufficient, if it's enough, you don't need to actually find the answer. That usually is going to take a while. You just need to figure out if it's possible, right? It's kind of like if I want to, let's say, drive a car, and I know I need to drive 100 kilometers. I turn on my car, and I look at my dashboard and I see that I have enough gas. That tells me I can drive 100 kilometers. That's all that I need to do. I don't need to actually drive 100 kilometers to figure out if I can do this. I can just look at the dashboard. So that's how data sufficiency questions work. Now, there are 5 answer choices, just like on all of the other questions in quant and verbal sections. But notice how the answer choices don't actually have answers. Instead, they tell us what statement do we need to answer that question. So I'll leave the answer choices here for you so you can, once you figure out which of these 2 statements are going to be enough to answer that question, then you can look at the answer choices and actually choose the one that's appropriate. I'll give you 2 minutes to work on that question. Then we'll talk about this question. And again, please don't Google it. It's going to not be as much fun. So there you go. You have 30 seconds left. All right, I am going to end the survey right now. If you haven't chosen the answer yet, just go with what you feel is right. Doesn't really matter if it's right. Just go with your gut feel. You 5 seconds. All right, let me share the answer with you. Let me share the results. So according to the majority vote, the right answer should be C. Well, let's see. Let's see if that's actually the right answer. C, and then E, and then D, and then A and B. Very few people voted for A and B. Well, let's take a look. Now, if we were to look at the official explanation in the official guide, this is the question from the official GMAT guide, so that's a question from the past exam, then this is going to be the official explanation. So once you understand this, you should be ready to determine the value of D. I don't know about you, I find this confusing. This looks like way too much algebra. Looks like we are trying to really solve this problem the high school way, instead of thinking as if we were to be, let's say, a manager of this store, right? If I'm a manager, I probably won't use variables such as P and D and so on if I'm trying to determine the strategy for my store. Instead, I'm going to say, okay, well, so we have some shirts that we're selling, and we would like to sell more shirts. So we will create an incentive for our clients when they come in and when they buy 2 shirts, we'll make the same profit that we would make on the sale of just 1 shirt at the regular price. So we'll make the same amount of money whether they buy 2 or they buy 1, but we just want to sell these shirts. Otherwise, we don't make any profit. So essentially what will be determined is that on the second shirt, we're making no profit, right? All of the profit from the sale of 2 shirts is the same as the profit from the sale of 1 shirt at the regular price. And notice how the customer buys the first shirt at the regular price and the second shirt at the discount. So we're giving away the second shirt at cost. Now, the question was asking us what was the discounted price of the second shirt. That is actually the same as the cost of the shirt to the store. So now we're going to try to figure out what is that price by seeing what information would the GMAT give us. Now, statement 1, it tells us the regular price of the shirts. Well, knowing the regular price doesn't help us because we don't know what was the amount of the discount, what was the cost, perhaps what was the discounted price, what was the percentage discount, nothing like that. So that's not particularly helpful. How about statement 2? Well, statement 2 tells us that the cost to the store is $12. But we've just determined that the discounted price for the second shirt, which is what the question's asking, is actually equal to the cost of the shirt to the store. And statement 2 gives us the cost. So that is exactly what we need. That is why statement 2 is sufficient, but statement 1 is not. And the right answer is actually B. This was the least popular answer. And again, notice how we haven't really done any math. All we needed to understand is on a more conceptual level. We call it here at Ultimate Master a conceptual math. So on a more conceptual kind of CEO manager level, what does it really mean? And how do I understand this? Now, of course, that's a skill, so it takes some time to practice and knowing exactly how the GMAT can actually ask the questions. And it also, of course, doing something like this requires a lot of confidence, because what a lot of people will end up doing is, as they actually maybe even figuring this out, they'll say, I need to go back and perhaps see if I can actually find that number. And that's kind of like saying, let me see if I have enough gas. Let me actually start driving to see if I can actually prove to myself that I can do this. Right? So we need to know these strategies. And of course, we need to have the confidence. Now, speaking about the confidence, I wanted to share with you just a very quick story. And that's the story of Darini. She came to our class. Actually, I believe she was in the same class as Daria in April, just when the pandemic started, when we started teaching our classes in a live online format as opposed to in person. So one of the things that was really interesting in her story, as she shared it, that she had a lot of anxiety about the GMAT and specifically about math. And the only way how she could overcome it and build her confidence is that she needed to set for herself a target of how she's going to study. And her targets consisted of doing a certain number of questions per day, but it wasn't actually about getting a certain number of them right. So if you got this question wrong, that's okay. For the Rini, she just said, it doesn't matter. All I need to do is I'm going to do a certain number of questions per day, and I will make sure that I learn from these questions. I'm going to get some feedback. She came to our class and she came to our office hours almost every week. So we worked through a few questions. We include some private tutoring in our course. She took advantage of that as well. And what's interesting is that because she had a plan that wasn't really telling her how she's doing in terms of getting the questions right, but it was just about following the process, following the system, she actually didn't feel like she was improving. Right? For her, every time she would be thinking about the 700 plus score, she would have a lot of anxiety. So she just needed to know, if I do these questions, whether or not I get them right, I'll feel very successful. So that's how she was building her confidence. And everybody's different, right? So if you come and join us, we're going to work with you specifically for you, how you can build this confidence. And the long story short is she went for her test. She was planning to do the test multiple times because she didn't really believe that she can get a 700 in the first attempt. And then she went for the real test in July. She actually did the test in person. She had to wear a mask and everything. And she walked out of a test center, got a score of 700. She actually called me and she shared the funny story. She said, when I walked away with that paper that says 700, I couldn't believe it. So I walked back in and I said, are you sure this is my name? Because I don't believe that this is actually my score. And they said, yeah, don't worry, Darini, that is really your score. And she called me and said, this is really against all odds. I got that score because I had the right plan. And it was the most important. And then we helped her with the application. Then she actually is starting her program at Oxford, at the Oxford School of Business in next September. Right, so having a plan is really, really important. And how do you keep yourself motivated? And I'm actually leading towards how you can build your plan as well, and how you can define your own success on the GMAT, right? And we'll talk about that as well. But I wanted to show you another question, and we'll do a couple questions. We'll keep doing questions as we are sprinkling these tips on how you can study. So here's the next question, and that is the question that is actually from one of the GMAT forums. I've shown you a question from the official guide with the explanation from the official guide. And I wanted to show you a question from one of the GMAT forums, because I know many of you are searching for different resources. So, so this is a question that I pulled from one of these forums so that you can take a look. Again, I'm going to launch a quick poll, give you about a minute to answer this question, and we'll talk about different ways of doing this question. I'll give you 15 more seconds, and then we'll talk about this question. All right, let me end the voting right here. So as you could see, the most popular answer is actually D, which is 20%. And then again, we have a nice Christmas tree that goes like a Christmas tree to A, all the way to the top of the tree. So now, in order to answer this question, first of all, we have to understand what is it that we're actually talking about. So we have two circles. One is a bigger circle, and then we are decreasing the radius of that circle. And the question was, how was the area affected? So there are a couple of ways of doing this question. And again, the way this question was explained in that forum was simply by using a formula for the area, which is pi r squared. And then we could take the new radius is going to be 9/10 of the r. And then there's actually a formula to calculate the difference. I don't know about you, but I have a master's of mathematics. When I look at these formulas, my stress level is going up. And I can imagine that for many people, that might be even worse. And if you know what you're doing, you can probably do this question in maybe a minute, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But that's generally going to be way over complicating things. So that's how that forum recommended that you do this question. So if you're comfortable with these formulas, then that's great. But most people are not. And the more complicated the formula, the easier it is to make a mistake. So perhaps, again, let's look at this question from a different perspective. And I could tell you from my own experience, if you're doing a lot of math when you're doing the GMAT, you're probably doing something wrong. Well, knowing the formula is helpful. The area is equal to pi r squared. But let's keep things simple. Let's just say that the old radius was 10. So the area is going to be 100 or 100 pi. Well, if you reduce the radius by 10%, it simply becomes 9. So the new area then becomes 9 times 9, so pi r squared, which is simply 81 pi. Now the question becomes, what's the percentage change from 100 to 81? Well, that will be a drop of 19%. And the answer has to be C. And we can do this with very little math. Right? So this is a question that we call the pick a number strategy, where you actually pick a number that's fairly easy and you just work through the problem by figuring out what would the answer be if we knew that radius. And there were a couple of clues in this question that actually told us that we can use that strategy. So as you are thinking about how are you actually going to study, and I will give you the exact step-by-step process, one of the things that you might ask yourself is, what are the good resources for me to use? And we get a lot of students who come to us and ask this question. I wanted to give you a quote actually from one of our clients. His name was Dylan. He came to us around March, I believe, and he did his test in July. Now, what's interesting about Dylan, he works in management consulting. He works for one of the big 4 firms, and he was really busy at work. So when he came, he said, I need the most efficient process, and I don't have time to fool around. I know there are lots of resources, lots of materials. I need the ones that work. So he came in, and specifically in his comments, and you can see his comments on Google if you go and go to our website and see Google reviews. He said that he used only Admit Master and the official guide materials. So that's what we use. We use only our resources that we've developed. Our company has been around for over 20 years, and I've been with this company for 10 years. So that's how long we were teaching the GMAT Mastery program. And using only these resources, just following the program, he got a score of 740. Right? So when you come to our program, and that's important, we call it the all-inclusive program. That means that everything that you need to prepare for the GMAT is something that we are going to provide. So you don't have to go and get additional subscriptions or additional resources or extra books. Everything that you need to prepare for the GMAT, we are going to give you. Now, Dylan got a score of 740. And the question then is, well, I mean, is that a good score? And, why would somebody want to get a score of 740 and perhaps maybe not 700 or 710? Well, the question is, what score do you really need in order to get into the program of your choice? Because for some schools, that's going to be a score that's above average. For some schools, it's going to be below average. In fact, I wanted to show you the ranking of the schools by their GMAT score. And it's not necessarily the ranking that's reflecting how good is the school or prestigious, but it simply gives us the ranking by their GMAT score. So in the US, and I know many of you are coming from the US or perhaps from other countries that are going to apply to the US, these are the average scores. We had a client recently who came to us, and you can read his comments as well on Google. He did his test 4 times, and the highest score he got was 710. He came to our program, and he managed to get a score of 740. Now, you might be thinking 710 to 740, that's not a big improvement, but it actually is a huge improvement because it kind of like competing in the Olympics. Person 1 gets the gold, and person 4 gets nothing. Right? That's how this competition is like, because the score of 710 is the top 10%, the score of 740 is the top 2-3%. So essentially, we need to beat a lot of people who are now better than us if we want to get that very high score. And the score of 740 is really now becoming a game changer. So specifically for that person, Philip, he just got an admission at Columbia Business School, and and really what made the difference is that score of 740, because now it's above average. Now, at most of the Canadian schools, it's also quite high. And again, these are the scores ranked based on their GMAT scores. As you could see, most of them are kind of in the 80th percentile range. Now, the question then becomes, okay, so how do we get that score? Now, the average on the GMAT is 560. So if everybody who goes for the test, half of the people get above 560 and half of the people are going to get below 560. And if we want to get that 700 score, that happens to be an 88th percentile. Now, I have a trivia question for you. We talked about the GMAT success rate. So the question I have for you is, what is really the percent of people who get 700 plus scores on the GMAT? Let me know. Just throw things in the chat box. What is that percent of people who get these scores? I kind of gave it away almost a little bit by sharing that percentage with you. All right, well, most of you are saying 12%. Somebody's saying depends on your base. So I guess perhaps you maybe have been in our class before. So yes, indeed, that does depend on the base. So what percent of what people? The answer that I like to use is 0.3, and that is actually the answer from the GMAT. So the GMAT defines the success on the GMAT is not by what scores people get when they do the test, but they use a different base. And that is everybody who begins to study for the test, or everybody who takes some steps to prepare for the test. Because you might be surprised, or probably won't be surprised, that not everybody who prepares for the test actually does the test. So the 0.3%, literally what this means in numbers is that if you and I wake up in the morning and decide to do the GMAT, then yeah, and there is no window of questions here. So it was more like in the chat box. So if you and I decide to, decide to study for the GMAT, the chance of us getting a score of 700 or more is 1 in 300. Right, so where do we get these numbers? Well, according to the GMAT, about 7 million people begin preparing for the test every year. 2 million people will actually create an account on MBA.com. 200,000 people, so only 10% of these will register for the test and pay the test fee. And only 12% of those will get a score of 700. So 24,000 out of 7 million, that's 0.3%. And I was personally shocked that only 3% of people who actually begin preparing for the test will show up for the real test. I was really shocked. I thought it would have been a much higher number, but that's the official statistics from the GMAT, and they collect these statistics based on what sorts of sources that are accessible to them. So the question is, why do so many people give up? Why do 97% of people don't actually do the GMAT, even though they perhaps really want to? It is, to a large degree, it depends on a couple of factors. One is not everybody is really committed. They might just think that doing an MBA or a master's degree is a good idea, but they don't necessarily maybe understand what's involved or don't really committed to doing this. But another fairly significant factor is that many people, the way they prepare for the test is they just say, I'm going to hit the books and I'm going to review stuff. I don't know about you, but that's how I was preparing for some of my university and college level exams. My exams in the morning or a week from now, I got to read a book. So I would go to a bookstore and pick up the book that perhaps is the official guide, or maybe I'm going to go and pick up these books, or maybe these books, or I go on Amazon, buy all kinds of books that are available to me. Some of these companies are actually owned by Amazon. So you might be surprised that two very large GMAT prep companies are actually owned by Amazon. So they're essentially publishing companies that publish books. So if you go, you see the most expensive books on Amazon. Well, these are the books that are actually written by Amazon. That's why they're so expensive and they get marketed heavily. This book was actually written by one of our instructors. So the books are all good for their purpose, which is help us review the theory and give us some concepts and have a number of questions that we can practice on. But the books also sometimes drag us down, because I hear this a lot, that somebody would say, I have a lot of books at home, and you might relate to that. And sometimes I would pull up a book from a bookshelf and I would read a few pages, I will do a few questions, and they look fairly challenging. And then I don't really feel like I'm progressing, so I'm going to put the books back on the shelf. So we need that way to make sure that we are actually improving. And we need to also remember, it's not about getting the knowledge, which is what's in the book. We could use the book, or we could use some of the other resources to help us develop the skills. And again, like I mentioned, I do like analogies, so I'm going to give you another analogy. Hopefully this will help you relate to what we're talking about in the GMAT as well. And that is, again, an analogy of driving that car. Remember when we talked about data sufficiency, having enough gas? Well, if I want to learn how to drive a car, I can read a book on driving, and that was indeed the first step. Every time that somebody wants to learn how to drive, they need to pass a theory exam, like learn the rules. But if you want to be quite competitive in driving a car, we got to develop the skill. So how did we develop these skills when we learned how to drive? Perhaps that's the same strategy we could use in order to learn how to do well in the test. So to master this game of the GMAT, we can follow the same process. First, let's learn some rules. Now, what are the rules in the GMAT? Essentially, everything from high school or secondary school that's tested on the GMAT. And by the way, not a lot. I was just speaking with somebody earlier today about grammar rules. That person was saying that she's really overwhelmed with the GMAT because she's not really good with grammar. And the English language has so many grammar rules that potentially could be tested on the GMAT. Well, what's really interesting, however, is that the GMAT tests a grand total of about 9 or 10 grammar rules. So these 9 or 10 grammar rules cover 99% of all of the questions, sentence correction questions on the GMAT. So we don't have to be experts in grammar. In fact, we can learn this theory really quickly. Like, what's a subject? What's a verb? In math, that's what's a fraction? What's a decimal? What's a percent? What does it mean to take a square root of a cube or a cube root of a number? That's the basic theory. That's really important. That's a foundation. Remember, we can't really just get into a car if we don't know the signs of the road. So we need to know the rules. That's why we always recommend, before you come to our class, first, you learn the rules. And there are some really good high school textbooks. The official guide has a good review. And for all of our students, we will provide access to a portal where you are going to be practicing some of these rules. So instead of just saying, I know how to add 2 fractions, let's just practice adding fractions. And let's practice in an adaptive environment where the fractions keep getting harder as we go along. So that's step number 1. Well, step number 2, you remember when we learned how to drive a car, we got into the car. That was really important because when we want to learn how to drive, we actually have to drive for some time until we develop this skill. That's what we're doing right now. And as if you join our class, that's what the classes are going to be like. Remember that we didn't get into a car by ourselves because it was, first of all, it's quite dangerous, because if we make some sort of a mistake, we can get into trouble. The GMAT is not as dangerous, but remember 97% of people give up. So that probably means that they're not really fulfilling their career goals if the MBA is really what they want to do, or a master's degree. What's also really important about getting into a car with somebody who is experienced, and that is we want to make sure that we learn the best strategies up front. Because when we're trying something for the first time, I want to see what would be a good way of doing this, right? I don't want to experiment. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to learn from somebody who's already figured this out, and then I get to practice and maybe make things better. And I know also that initially when I try something out for the first time, I'm going to make mistakes. And that's okay to make mistakes. That's why even here, it's okay to make mistakes. And when you come to our class, oh my gosh, you're going to make so many mistakes. That's the purpose of the class, because that's how you learn. By doing mistakes, by seeing mistakes of other people, and the instructor is going to guide you in really pulling the right insights from this experience. So that's really important. And learning these best strategies up front are important because also of the third step. Once we passed that first driving license, we then, remember, in most of the, if you are in Canada or United States, in most of the provinces or the states, you don't get to be fully licensed by passing your first exam. You had to drive for another few months, and then you get your full license. In that case, you can carry more passengers, you can have a small amount of alcohol in your blood, and so on. You can drive at night and all kinds of other things. So that was also important. That is why on the GMAT, after you leave the class, you gotta practice. That is very important. Now, you may have heard that many people are saying, or you may have heard this, that practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the more perfect something is going to become. Well, I like this quote, which is a different quote, this practice makes permanent. Or I like to use another quote, practice makes a habit. If you're practicing something for a long time, you're developing new habits. Now, let me give you an example. If you've driven a car recently, and if you've been driving a while, you may remember that the first time you were in a car, you didn't know what to do. There were so many things you had to do, and because you didn't really have the habit of driving yet, you had to think consciously about doing all of that, and it was really so overwhelming. That's how the GMAT is going to feel like at first. But after some time, if you learn the right strategies and you develop the right habits, that's why it's so important to learn these good strategies up front. You develop the right habits, then everything's automatic. You look at the question, you know exactly what to do. You don't have to think, or you have to think a little, but you don't have to think too much, because we have so much of the brain power. You can think of your brain can burn a certain amount of sugar, a certain amount of energy during the 4-hour exam. So you can't really overuse that brain power. You have to use it sparingly. So we have to develop some habits so that we can think less, perhaps, and we can use more of our kind of like almost instinct, some of our habits with how we do things. So we can use our power to do some calculations if it's necessary, to really analyze the question properly. So these habits are really, really important. You're going to be developing habits by doing lots of practice after you've learned these strategies. Right, so remember, rules first, get some knowledge, learn the right skills, practice, get some feedback. That's why our class, for example, is 6 or 12 weeks long. By the time you leave the class, you will have developed the habits already, and then you just keep going. You have the right momentum. And then you develop these new habits. And on the day of the test, as I've mentioned, there are 2 things you need to have. And one of these things is you need to be prepared. And you're going to be prepared by having the right habits. The second thing is you need to have confidence. And confidence, I talked about the example of the reading, and again, developing these habits and applying them is going to help you get confidence as well. So if you and I wake up on the day of our test and we feel like we have the right habits, that we don't really have to think too much as we approach in the question, or at least it kind of almost a few things become automatic, and we have the right confidence in using what we've learned, the test is going to go really well. And if we feel like every question is a struggle, It's a challenge. Every time our stress level is going up because we don't really know what to do, and that depresses our confidence, the test is not going to go well, right? So that's hopefully going to give you a little bit of a, again, with just like a gut check of whether you're ready or not. Now, many people, when they approach the GMAT for the first time, I hear this a lot. When I do one-on-one consultation, I do many every day, I do a few. Many people would say, well, you know, geez, I didn't really know about this. I didn't know that something about the test. And when you come to our class, usually at the end of the class, we're going to ask you to share what you've learned. And we can't really do this here just because of a large number of people. In our live class, the class is fully interactive. So we'll actually ask you to share. And very often we'll hear, well, I didn't know about this on the test. I didn't know that the answer choices follow certain patterns. I didn't know that the GMAT is phrasing questions a certain specific way. So it's not just random. They're actually following certain patterns that we can learn. If you remember, perhaps at some point you've learned the different levels of knowledge. The knowing what we know is the most comfortable level of knowledge, but not knowing what we don't know is really our blind spot. And many people, when they approach the GMAT, they just don't know what they don't know. For many people, it wouldn't even occur to them to look for certain specific things, right? So, and somebody was asking, is the GMAT score given immediately? Yes, in the in-person exam. No, in the online exam, you usually have to wait about 3 days in order to get your score in the online exam. Right? So see, there's a lot of things we don't know. So the easiest way to prepare for the test is to follow a program that's going to be structured for you. So we have a program here at Admit Mastery called the GMAT Mastery, and really the most important feature about this program, it is a skills-based training. So knowing the formula is important, but we really want to make sure that you come to our class, and it is a more intensive class than most of the other classes. So if you can notice, you're going to spend over 50 hours in a class, and it's going to be over 6 or 12 weeks. So over this time, the goal is to really teach you how to think differently. Remember that quote from Daria, how to think on a different level, how to really think outside the box. We really make it very easy for you to make a decision. We're saying, come and take this program. All of the study materials are going to be included. If you need to repeat your classes for any reason for 1 year, that is going to be free, and we'll give you lots of personal support. You can come, and once a week, we have special office hours where you can come and ask any questions outside of your live class. There's 3 personal tutoring sessions that are included as well. And we're going to coach you until you're done. So if it takes you 2 months, it takes you 5 months, it doesn't really matter. We all work on different schedules, we all learn differently. We have different backgrounds, different strengths and weaknesses. All right, so everybody's different. That's why we keep our classes fairly small, so you can have that individual attention. Now, and today I want to make it even easier for you to make a decision. Now, we have 2 classes that are coming up in January. And if you join these classes now, and we'll give you until tomorrow to join them, you're going to be able to save $200 of the fee of this program. Now, the course, the next weekend course, which is Saturday and Sunday morning, it's Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 2, that class is almost full. We have very, very few seats left. The class on January 5th is about 3/4 full. So we have slightly more seats left. And that is the course that's already a higher price online. So if you do decide to register, just go on this website, admitmaster.com/offer. You're going to be able to fill out the form. You can actually pay for the course online. We do need to talk to you first because we want to make sure that this is the right choice for you and that you are going to be benefiting from the program. It's a very transparent process. You'll know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So you have a consultation with myself or one of our instructors. And then if everything is good, if we both feel that this is the right program for you, you'll be able to book a seat. And what we are asking at that point is that you make a $500 deposit to book a seat, and you can pay the rest once the class actually starts. Right? So many people asking, well, how much is the course? Well, what we did is we actually pulled a few different parts of the course. So of course, you're going to have the classroom hours. And if you look at some of the other courses, you would notice that generally to be in a GMAT class, it's about $50 an hour to be in a class. If you take the cost of the program divided by the number of hours, you're generally paying about $50. We'll give you the online platform that you're going to be using to study. So you'll see class recordings on that platform. You're going to see practice tests, thousands of practice questions. You'll be doing lots of things. You'll see video explanations. There are over 600 videos on that platform. So lots of additional resources in addition to your live classes. That's included in your program as well. 3 hours of private tutoring, that's also included. That's the majority of the classes. That's an extra fee. The GMAT books, so we do actually provide physical books if you are located in North America. If you are outside of North America, we will give you electronic books, but it's the same book. And we'll also include, if you are applying to a master's or MBA program, we'll include the resume review. So we'll help you understand how strong your resume, and that's included for free as a part of this program. If you don't take our course, that's normally a $300 service. So all of this together is over $4,000, and that's what's included in the program. So the regular fee for our course is 1,699 Canadian dollars, or if you are located outside of Canada, that's 1,399 US dollars. And if you do register using that offer that I mentioned, then it's going to be 14.99 Canadian or 11.99 US. Now, I know if you've done some research, you probably noticed that most of the classes are going to be quite a bit higher than that. So if you are in the United States, for 11.99 American dollars, you are going to be getting all of that, including these 3 hours of private tutoring and all of the books, the physical books, and you are going to be in a live class. Now, of course, when you're thinking about this investment, one of the things that you're looking forward to is, of course, learning the new skills to help you get into the business program. But we also do keep track of the success of our students. And what we've noticed, because we keep in touch with many of our clients and we get the report back to us of what their results are when it comes to the application, the average entrance scholarship that our students get is about $15,000. Some of them get a lot more. Some of them get, we actually had a student recently who got close to $200,000. So pretty significant scholarship. But on average, it's about $15,000. So if we're thinking about this, then it's 10 times return on investment. That's an average across all of our students. And if we take just the people who get scores of 700 or more, the average scholarship is about $30,000. So same investment, just a little more commitment from your side to get a 700 and double your investment as well. That's better than buying Tesla. And Tesla is already priced a lot higher. So now this is a chance to make this investment. And of course, as I mentioned, we do guarantee that we'll keep working with you until you are done. There's an unconditional guarantee that there is no extra fee to come to classes and to continue using our resources for this period of time. And for most people, that should be enough because we'll have an efficient study plan for you. Now, if you go on that adminmaster.com/offer, you're going to see some special offers. Now, we do also have a self-study program. So if for whichever reason you cannot join our live program, you can either take our on-demand mastery training, which is essentially just video recordings of classes. So it's a little more affordable, and you'll have the same instructor support. So you still these tutoring sessions, you'll have access to exactly the same resources, just video recordings of these classes. So that's also available. But if you don't need any instructor support, you just need the resource. So you're not going to get access to classes or class videos. You will get access to essentially self-prep resources with lots of practice questions and the explanations to these questions, as well as video reviews. So it's really good if you've already been studying for the GMAT, if you feel like you need little help for the preparation, but just lots of practice. That's a very affordable resource as well. And that's if you looked at some of the courses, such as maybe The Economist, these sorts of courses. So this would be a similar course. So you get access for 6 months, and it's very affordable comparing to these courses as well. Now, I wanted to show you, just before I pass control to Kumio, I wanted to show you one final question. And that is the question that is a problem-solving question that we do in our course in the very first class. So this is actually my favorite question. That's why we do this as just one of the very first, I think, first 3 or 4 questions in a class. So here's the question. I will give you 20 seconds to read it. All right, so at this point, when I'm doing this question in a live class, I would notice by just the look on the eyes of most people, they either start getting distracted or they're going to read this passage for the second time. It's a little confusing when we read it for the first time, especially given that there are no numbers. So at this point, I would usually ask, would you like to see the answer choices? And yes, everybody will say, gonna say, yes, yes, I would. And here are the answer choices. Now, what do you think? Just maybe let me know in a chat box, do these answer choices really help or do they make the question even more confusing? What do you think? Yes, thanks for sharing this. Most people are going to say, well, wait a second, this makes it even more confusing because the way we used to doing this question in a high school, so like what most people consider the proper way of doing the question, right, is we have the distance and the question is asking how many miles, so we're looking for the distance, and we have the rate and the time. The problem, however, we were given the rate from home and then another rate of speed back home, but the t is just one, the total of t hours. So it looks like we have to build a couple of different equations. Perhaps there's a distance from home with the time t1 and the distance back home with the time t2. That's how the official guide is going to explain it. The times together are going to be t, the distances are the same. So after building a few equations, we still have a few variables left. So most people, if I do give this question in a live class, after about 5 minutes, they're just going to say, let's do another question. So is there a different way of approaching this question, especially if you were not comfortable with this sort of math? You know, sometimes I have my engineering friends who are just going to just write half a page of formulas and in 30 seconds, they give me an answer. But most of us are not like this. Most of us are not as comfortable with math. And besides, if we're doing so much math, very often they'll make a mistake somewhere and they'll choose their own answer anyway. So let's look at this question more conceptually. By first understanding the formula, which is distance is equal to rate times time. Now, yeah, I know we know this formula, but even if we forgot the formula, then we might just remember that if we want to find the distance, we multiply speed by time. That's what we do. If I decide to drive from Toronto to Montreal, and I know it takes me 5 hours and I'm driving at 100 kilometers an hour, well, I know the distance is 500. It's just so easy. We drive every day, so we know. It will never occur to me to, let's say, add the speed and time. I think that just makes no sense. You know, I would never say that the distance is 105 because the speed is 100 and the hours is 5, right? But yet, when we look at the GMAT, we all of a sudden forget a lot of the things we know from our common sense. Because answer choice B tries to add speed to time. We can't add speed to time. That's illegal. They measure different things, and that's just not how we find the distance. So B can't possibly be the right answer. Well, let's look at some other answers that perhaps do the same thing. Answer choice D, x plus y plus t, that's speed plus time. No, we can't really do this. E, speed plus time, y plus t. No, can't really do this. So we have two answer choices left, A and C. Notice how we've done no math so far. And that's a real question, by the way. It used to be in the official guide 2020. It's been removed now, so it's no longer in 2021. So I have two answer choices left. And at this point, I usually ask a question, how many of them do we need to look at? And most people would say both. But the answer is actually, we just need to look at one of them. Because if A is right, we just pick A and move on. And if A is wrong, we pick C and move on. And I would, of course, like to look at A because it's a little simpler. And A simply gives us speed divided by speed, which gives us a ratio of two speeds. So let's say somebody's driving it twice as fast as somebody else. So the ratio is 2. And then we multiply this by hours, which is T. So the answer is actually going to be in hours if we look at answer choice A. But we do not need hours. The question was how many miles can Aaron jog? That is why A cannot be the right answer. And look at this. We're down to just one answer choice. We don't even need to look at it. It's the only one that's left. And we can do this in 30 seconds. And that's a real question. And that's how you would be approaching a lot. Now, this is one of the strategies. But that's how you'd be approaching a lot of the questions on the GMAT, because this is how we can get to hard questions quickly, and this is how we can deal with questions that seemingly have a lot of difficult math, and we can get them right, and we can be very confident in what we are doing. So the question is, how long does it take to learn this skill? And the answer is, I'm going to give you an answer that's maybe an MBA. I have an MBA as well, so maybe a very MBA kind of like answer. It depends. It depends on many factors, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Brian came to our class in January, so exactly pretty much a year from now, he started our class. I believe it was also maybe January 5th. And he said, guys, I have 2 months. March 1st, he got a new job at Google. He is a software engineer. He said, I'm moving to California. I don't have time. That's it. I got to get my score, because he was applying to a 2+2 program at one of the American schools. It was at Wharton, actually. So his application deadline was in April, and he knew once he starts his job at Google, he wouldn't be able to study at all. So he said, this is it. I have 2 months. In fact, he took a real test just 4 days after our course, because he wanted to give himself a buffer just in case he needs to retake it. And he started from 570. He got the score of 760. He was really committed, and he was following exactly how the structure of the program was like. Now, he was studying about 35 hours a week, according to him. And he was able to get this amazing score, top 1%. If you cannot study full time, if let's say you are a working professional, first of all of our classes are outside of the work time. So you either take classes in the evenings, which is Eastern time, that's 6 to 10. Our classes are 4 hours long, just like a real test, because we need to train you what it's like to be there for 4 hours. Or you can take your classes on the weekends, which is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So regardless of what time zone you're in, we're hoping one of these schedules is going to work for you so that you won't be at work during that time. And the majority of people in our course are going to be working professionals. That's why we also give you a chance to take just half of the course workload. So instead of finishing the whole course in 6 weeks, you can take just 1 class a week instead of 2, and you'll be taking our class over a 12-week period. And the class is designed in a way that it's actually possible to do so. Now, we do keep track of the success of our students. And of course, not everybody will get a score of 760, but the results are quite impressive among our students. The average score of our students is 670, and because it's a very personal program, we do keep in touch with everybody, and you will feel like that it's very personal, because even to get into our program, we need to talk to you. And approximately 35% of our graduates achieve scores of 700 or more. This number is actually higher this year. It used to be about 30%. It is already higher, because what we find is with studying from home in our live class, and our live classes are very similar to the in-person class. We make them so interactive, but now it's easier to be in a class. You don't have to travel anywhere. So we do see more of our students being more committed to getting these results. Now, 670, that means half of the people get above, half the people get below. So very often we get asked, well, what score will I actually get? I understand the average, but what score will I get? Well, and again, the answer is it depends. It depends on what score you need. And I'll give you a final example here, and I'll pass control to Kumio in just a minute. And that is, if you want a really high score, you can get it. Fionn came to our course, and she scored, I don't remember what she scored in a practice test, but it wasn't high at all. And initially, she just said, I would be happy with a 600. I will be over the moon with a 650. And that was like about a year ago. And we said, okay, Fionn, here's what you need to do, and just keep studying until you get that score. We're here to support you. She was using these tutoring sessions. She was coming and getting some additional coaching from us that's included in the program outside of a class. And then she calls me 7 months later and says, Sergey, I just walked out of a test center with a 760 score. What can I do with this amazing score? And I of course, congratulated her and said, well, Fionn, how did you manage to get 760? You just wanted 650. I said, well, you know what? I figured I have time. And by the way, so Fionn, you might be thinking 7 months. She's a nurse in the ER room. So she works shift job. And she has 3 other jobs. So she has like 4 or 5 hours a week to study. She just said, I'm really enjoying it. This is fun. I feel like I'm doing these puzzles, I'm challenging myself, and I have time. So I'm going to keep studying until I'm happy with my score. And she ended up with 760. And so if you want 760, you can definitely do this, and we would love to help you. You're going to have to learn it somewhere. So come and learn it here. We'd love to work with you. I can promise your experience working with Admit Master is going to be nothing like you have seen before. And you can take my word for it, or you can go on Google and read reviews from our students. Many of our clients say that this is the best course they've ever taken. And the instructor who's teaching the class, I'm teaching some of the classes. Kumio knows him. His name is Tristan. He is amazing. He's hilarious. You're going to have a really good time in that class. So where do we go from here? I'd like to invite you to really commit to this process. Come and join us in our live virtual classes. Like I mentioned, the next class is on January 5th. We are going to have the next verbal refresher class on January 4th. If you've never experienced what the GMAT is like, you can go to jmsb.trygmat.com. So the John Molson School of Business, that's what the service we provide in partnership with JMSB. You can take that practice test, and you can find all of that at admitmaster.com/alpha. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to chat, then I'm just going to launch a really quick survey here. If you would like to chat, just let me know. I'll contact you right away. And again, you can't get into our course until we speak. So we'll chat, and I'll help you make the right decisions. And right now, I'd like to welcome Kumyo. So we do a lot of work together. Really enjoy when she comes and does the presentations here. She's going to share some really cool strategies with you that are going to help you apply. So I'm actually going to unshare my screen right now so that Kumyo can share hers. And please do stay. I think you're going to find this super, super valuable, and you'll learn what to do and what not to do when you are applying to business schools. So Kumyo, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Sergey. I always enjoy being at these workshops because I hear all these interesting stories of students with unique backgrounds, and it really is a testament that anyone can do an MBA regardless of what kind of studies they've done and what kind of work experience they have. So I'm really enjoying this myself as well. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Anna, or Kumyo, as you prefer. I'm the manager in recruitment and marketing at the John Molson School of Business, Concordia University. If you wish to reach out to me, you can do so by email at gradadvisor.jmsb@concordia.ca. You can also reach out to me by LinkedIn, by WhatsApp, by WeChat. This will be also available at the end of the session if you wish to take it down, or if you have any questions about your profiles, you just want to talk about your resume a little bit, your plans to do an MBA, no problem, don't hesitate to contact me. Now, I want to specify that the tips and tricks that I'm going to be giving tonight are not applicable only to John Molson School of Business, but really to any business school that you'll be applying to. I've worked at other business schools before, and we stay in close touch with our colleagues from other universities as well. And there's definitely a best practices, a set of best practices that you can follow to have a very successful application. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. So we'll start by talking about what you might have heard so many times from so many different recruiters, and it's really defining that holistic approach. Every time you go to an info session, they tell you, oh, we don't look at just the GMAT or just the GPA or just the work experience. We look at it really holistically, and that is really true. So very often we have candidates who ask us, but which one has more weight? Which one is more important? Which one do I focus on? The truth is you really have to focus on every single one of them in some way, and every single one of them can become a strength. And if you have one area that's a little bit weaker, another one can be, making up for that. So I think it's really important to know that we're really looking at each of these elements very closely. We will be looking at your academic credentials, which is probably why you're here. So the GPA, the GMAT. We'll be looking at your work experience, I guess the length of it, the quality of it, what kind of companies you've attended, what kind of career goals you have in relation to that. We'll be looking for elements in your profile that showcase leadership potential. It could be volunteering, it could be work experience, it could be team leading, it could be any entrepreneurship project. We'll be looking at your extracurricular involvement as well. Like what do you do outside of work and studying? What are you passionate about? This might define if this is a really good fit for you at a specific MBA program, in a specific program. Maybe they have some different activities that would be really well geared for what you're trying to achieve. And of course, we'll be looking at your communication skills. So both in writing and in person during the interview, or maybe during the video interview, we'll be paying attention to those small details, because ultimately, what do we want? We want you to be successful in your career. We want you to find jobs, and to make a really great impression on our network, on our alumni, on our employers. So communication skills are, of course, extremely important. And of course, as I mentioned, the fit. Making sure that the program that we offer has something that is matching the way you can be successful. So, for example, some programs are very large and you might thrive in a very large classroom. Some programs are smaller. You might prefer to have more personalized attention. Some programs are really case-based learning. Some are more theoretical. How do you learn the best, and how can you make yourself as successful as possible through this program to make sure that you have a positive experience? And if you listen to different programs, you like the elements that you hear from them, you visit the campus. Okay, maybe not right now with COVID-19, but usually you would visit the campus, you would meet with alumni, you feel like you really fit well in there, then you'll be sure that it is a very positive and successful experience. So I'll go a little bit more into the details. The first advice I always give to all candidates is to figure out the reason why. Very often that reason changes through the MBA. So, if you decide I want to do an MBA to achieve X career goal, don't feel like you're setting yourself in stone for the next 2 or 1 year of the program. Of course, we want to figure out the reason why to make sure that an MBA program is the right program for you. It's a significant time and financial commitment. So we're going to want to understand those reasons. So try to figure out your current strength and your current situation. What is it that you bring to the MBA program? It's very much a two-way relationship. We're trying to find the best students for the program, but we're also trying to make sure we're the best school for you. Think of your career goals. What kind of transferable skills do you have? I like to recommend students to think about the narrative that they're going to be, showcasing. So what have you done so far? What are you trying to achieve? How does the MBA fit into that equation? And figure out if the MBA is the right one for you based on various factors. So earlier I mentioned different activities that you might be doing, the class size. It might be a matter of the kind of network that you want. It might be the city that you'll be located in. It might be, thinking about the kind of electives that you like to take. Do you want to learn more case learning, or do you want to do more, projects? Like all of these things will impact your decision to choose an MBA. And once you've done that, you're ready to prepare your application. Of course, you have to showcase your academic potential. We do look very closely at the GPA and the GMAT score, very, very much together. A lot of candidates ask us, do you look at the last 2 years of the GPA? Do you look at the whole 4 years? It really depends on the school. Some school will look at the full 4 years like ours does. And some schools will focus more on the last 2 years. Overall, we like to look at it overall because we might see also an improvement in your grades. We might look at different specific classes depending on the type of program you're applying for. If you're applying for a program that is really finance heavy, maybe they'll be looking at your finance classes. There's nothing you can do to fix your GPA if you didn't perform as well as you wished, back then. So one way to really make up for that is to come up with a very competitive GMAT score. And Sergey mentioned like different GMAT averages. It's good for you to look at the different averages at different schools. Very often we have recommended minimum or set minimum scores, but if you look at our average, you'll see where we would expect you to perform. And if you can be above average, you'll have better chances not only of admission, but also of securing scholarships. Also, during your undergrad, you might have done different extracurriculars, or you might be doing different extracurriculars now. You might want to make sure to highlight that in your resume, or highlight that somewhere in the statement of purpose or in one of the essays, so we can see that you were also very active and going beyond just your degree. If you want to really impress different admissions committee, if you have other certification, it's also really valuable. So if you've done your CPA, for example, or CA in different countries, if you've done any levels of the CFA, you've done your PMP, you've done different graduate certificates, master's degree, we'll be looking at all of these things. And again, if your GPA was a little bit less competitive because I don't know, for you had some personal reasons, or maybe you underestimated the degree, or maybe something happened, you can justify that in the statement of purpose. And if you did better in your second degree, or if you've gotten a certification that is difficult to obtain, like the CFA charter, for example, it adds a lot of valuable weight. But again, a great way to position yourself well is to have a competitive GMAT score. And I'm sure that's why you're all here, to figure out the best strategies to achieve that. So once you've prepared for uploading your transcripts, you're ready, you've got the GMAT score that you wanted, it's also time to showcase your professional achievements. As I mentioned earlier, we look at your overall achievements. So we'll look at not just the quantity, but also the quality. And when I mean quality, I'm saying it's not necessarily a specific company or a specific type of industry. It's really looking at how much responsibility did you have? Did you have the opportunity to team lead? Did you grow in your career? Did you have the opportunity to be promoted? All of these things you want to make sure to highlight. If you've led teams, make sure to highlight how many people you've led. If you've led projects, make sure you describe quantitatively the impact that those projects have had on your company. So if you were a salesperson, you might want to talk about your gross and net sales. Think about how you can showcase that in any types of work experience. Qualities, as I mentioned, we're looking for leadership potential. And if you're doing an MBA, it's because you really want to grow in your career. So to have that opportunity to showcase that teamwork, decision-making, your strategic input, in any way you can, is something that will add a lot of weight to your work experience. And sometimes it's just a matter of, practicing that 1-minute pitch when you meet with the different recruiters to tell them your story. And if you can impress them enough, that can also become an ally for you during the application process. We recruiters are trying to make sure that you have all the information that you need, and we can make the process as smoothly as possible. So make sure to connect with us so that we can give you advice on that as well. On top of your professional achievements, you're going to want to highlight your personal achievements as well. So earlier we were talking about how you can come from any background, and I literally mean any background. It doesn't have to be from business or engineering. It can be from arts, it can be from science. So make sure to highlight that as well. We've had MBA students in the past that were professional athletes or varsity athletes. We've had some that were artists. We've had some that were musicians. So you can definitely put that into your resume, especially if you've had like a great career in that. If you're passionate about volunteering or social causes, you can highlight that as well in your resume. If you've started your business, whether it was successful or not, make sure to highlight that as well. I actually have this funny story. When I was in India and I was showcasing the program, and I was saying, oh yeah, when we have this entrepreneur who, he failed his business and ended up at Google. But the fact is, after that, everyone started raising their hand. I have a failed business and I have a failed business. I'm not saying highlight your failed businesses, but if you have started a business and you've tried your best, it does showcase some qualities. So make sure to utilize that and figure out how to insert that into your narrative to showcase your skills. Another part of the application that is so important is, of course, the writing portion, which is typically a group of essays, or it might be a statement of purpose. It might just be also in writing when you're emailing with the different program representatives or the alumni. Make sure to check your spelling and to double check the school name. We understand that you're contacting multiple schools, but it's always a little bit awkward when we receive a message that's addressed to another school. And then we have to kind of rectify and make sure this was the right thing. So imagine yourself applying for a Big 3 consulting firm. You wouldn't call McKinsey, BCG, and vice versa, right? Like you would pay attention. It's the same thing. If you pay that attention to detail, it shows us that you'll pay attention to detail when you contact employers that come and visit our campus. So it is something that we do pay attention to. We recommend to be as authentic as possible. Be yourself. Don't create a narrative just based on what you think the school wants to hear. Create a narrative that fits who you are and what you want to showcase. And when in doubt, just think about a job application. You don't want to be hired for being someone that you're not. So find that right level of authenticity, but always remain professional, and then make sure that who you're portraying is who the school will want to showcase to their employees afterwards. For essays and statement of purpose, we tend to recommend to stay within the word limit. We have so many essays to have to go through, and we want to make it a very fair process. So it's a very good exercise of being concise and being precise, and conveying what you're trying to do in a very limited amount of words. So we recommend to, as much as possible, not exceed it too much. And of course, another part of the application will be the interview. And in some schools, you'll have an in-person interview. Some schools, you'll have a video interview. Some schools will be more a combination of both. It might be a phone interview or whatever it is. I think it's really important to just treat that interview the same way you would for any job interview. That means you want to be punctual, you want to be prepared. If you're doing a Skype interview or a Zoom interview, make sure to test your technology ahead of time. It's such a stressful process, right? So you don't want to be stressed on top of that because for some reason your microphone wasn't working, your camera wasn't working, right? So test it out ahead of time. Make sure to be there on time so that you can showcase the best version of yourself to the interviewer. And research the school. You want to make sure you don't sound too generic. Of course, all business schools may be quite similar, but there's also very key differentiation factors between each of them. So make sure to research that, prepare questions that stump us if possible. I love when someone has really done their research about the school and then they find a question and I go back from there. I'm like, oh, I wish I had a better answer to that. It shows that you've really done the extensive research. I'm not saying to look specifically for a question that stumps us, but showcase that you've done at least the research. Don't use the time that you have with us to ask things that are very basic, like, what is your GMAT minimum, or what is, do I need to have this component in my application if it's already listed, right? And then dress the part. And some of you will notice that I've written always wear pants. It is definitely a recruiter story that sometimes we have Zoom interviews and someone accidentally forgets to put a bottom and then they have to get up for some reason. And then you have this really awkward situation. When in doubt, remember, do not become the story that makes the recruiters laugh. Make sure to, dress professionally, showcase how dedicated you are. And again, when in doubt, always think about what would I do if this was a job setting? I think you would wear pants. I would hope you would wear pants for your job interview. Then, as I mentioned earlier, and maybe I keep mentioning this over and over, but interact with the schools, make valuable use of the admissions team time or the recruitment team's time. All the recruiters at all the universities are happy to really get to know you, to make sure that they can guide you through that process, to help you. Sometimes they'll be very honest with you. Maybe this school is a better fit than another school, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Connect with us. You wouldn't necessarily buy a house without visiting it. So it's the same thing. It's a huge investment of time. It's a huge investment of your finances. So make sure that it is indeed the right place for you. And you can connect with us. You can connect with our alumni. We're happy to connect you with our ambassadors. Some professors might be willing to connect as well. So make sure to get to know the community and figure out if this is a community you see yourself in. I tell you, at JMSB, the community is very close-knit. If you don't really like to have some sort of attention, if you prefer to be in the back of the classroom and be incognito, then that's probably not the right program for you. Like, we're a very, very close-knit family, and we follow our students closely. Everyone knows what's happening within the program. So definitely look into what kind of community it is and if you see yourself in there. And then take the process seriously with other schools. We understand sometimes you might have a number one, number two, number three choice, but depending on circumstances, your circumstance might change. You want to make sure that you treat these schools with the utmost respect, and vice versa. When you talk to us about another school, don't say things that are not positive. We have such a good relationship with one another, and we want to keep it that way. So try to always continue having positive interactions so that you can, again, showcase the best version of yourself. And so, I'll give a little bit of shameless promotion for John Molson School of Business. For those of you who may not know us, we're located in the beautiful city of Montreal, Canada's second largest city. And we're ranked top 5 in Canada in 2 major rankings, Bloomberg Business Week and The Economist at number 4. We're also top 3 in Canada for ROI. We're number 1 2 out of 3 years. And we're also number 1 in Canada for entrepreneurship, according to The Economist and Princeton Review. So a lot of great opportunities if you want to start your own business, a lot of great centers for entrepreneurship at John Molson School of Business. And if there were 3 main reasons that you could consider our MBA program, one is that it's personalized and flexible. We offer a very small class size. You have access to a wide network, very flexible schedule. If you are a Canadian student living in Montreal, it's the dream. You have so many different options and length of time that you can take advantage of. If you're an international student, there's so many great real-world experiences that you can take advantage. We do case-based learning, so you get to learn by doing in a very practical way. You You have experiential electives. So for example, if you want to do case competition, get credits for that, you could do that. Or if you wanted to do community service, so which is strategy for an NGO or an NPO, you could do that and get credits for that as well. You're interested in investment management, you can manage a $1 million fund and get credits for that. So a lot of opportunities for you to learn by doing, and so to have concrete experiences to showcase to employers when you're ready for post-graduation employment. And we offer, again, an excellent return on investment. Our tuition is one of the most affordable in Canada. So for international students, it's close to half that of our closest competitors in the top 5. So approximately 42,000 Canadian dollars in total for international students. If you're a Canadian student, this is where you get the real bargain, because this is a public program. So Canadian students from Quebec pay only approximately $6,000, and Canadian from rest of Canada pay approximately $15,000. So very affordable program. However, not a cheap program, because it is great opportunities that we showcase. We have 97% of our students who find employment within 3 months of graduation, with competitive base salaries of approximately $87,000 to $92,000, depending on the year. That doesn't include bonuses and non-guaranteed compensation. If you compare with any of our top 5 competitors, we really offer one of the best, if not the best, return on investment on that. So if you want to hear a little bit more about John Molson School of Business, you want to actually hear what the program is all about, our next coming webinars are going to be in January, because we're going to be closed for the holidays, but we have an MSc Master's webinar on January 13, MBA versus our MBA CFA program webinar on January 14th. And we have, if you want to hear about all of our programs, we're going to have one big open house that's happening virtually on January 21st. It's a great opportunity to hear about different types of program if you're not 100% sure that it's the MBA or the Master's. And again, if you want to get in touch with me, you want me to take a look at your profile, you want to just talk about business school, whatever it is, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, on WhatsApp, on WeChat, preferably not in the middle of the night. But aside when I'm sleeping, I'm always on my phone. So really don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm happy to answer these questions. I don't know if you have any questions about it, or if we have time for questions, Sergey, but I'll be here for a couple more minutes. So don't hesitate to put it in the chat box, and then I'll just respond to them as we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. I love that comment, always wear pants, because it's really important that in all of you are dealing with pretty much this entire community. It's really important to be professional. And this is kind of like, to a degree, going for a job interview, is you are being kind of almost evaluated. But please also do remember that people like Anna are on your side. Their job is to really help you understand if this is the right fit. Because if you're the right fit for the program, then that means the program is the right fit for you. So please take advantage of these resources and reach out, send an email to Grad Advisor, and start getting the ball rolling. One of the things I also wanted to mention is that there are a lot of student ambassadors in the program. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about what it's like to study in the program, and that will be the case with other schools as well, then that's what I normally recommend when I'm doing my one-on-one. Is you connect with these student ambassadors, see if you can relate to them, see if you like this experience, if you can picture yourself in the program. The more you know about the program, the more you can talk about the program and how it's really important for you to go to that program, then probably the more the school is going to also believe that you are the right fit for the program.
Absolutely. And sometimes we have student ambassadors that recommend candidates to us who, insist on giving an additional recommendation for specific candidates. We actually had this candidate last year who struggled a little bit during her undergrad, had a lower GPA than what we typically consider, but she performed really well in the GMAT. She had an interesting background, with a former varsity athlete, then worked in general management for a couple of years. She was really determined. She connected with many of our ambassadors. And when I say many, I can't even count how many, but I can remember on top of my head 3 or 4 who contacted me after meeting with her and said, I want to give a personal recommendation for this candidate. Who do I send this to? And then they send it to admissions team, and then we take that into consideration. And now this student is in the program, and she's doing fairly well. So I think it's really important to get to know our community. They have nothing to win or to lose from this. They just want to share their experience with you, and they'll be honest with you. They'll say, yes, this program is great for this. I didn't experienced this, or maybe, sometimes they talk with other schools. The one cool thing about Montreal is we're such a close-knit student city that our students actually do a lot of events with other universities as well. Like, for example, we had a big startup event that we organized, that our MBAs organized in collaboration with the MBAs of McGill and HSA. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19 lockdown, we had to turn this event into an online event, but there are a lot of great opportunities for networking and collaboration. So really, if you want to know more about the experience, come talk to us and come talk to our student ambassadors. They'll be happy to show you everything that they're involved in and all the great activities that you can join during your MBA.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this advice. Now, if anybody has any other questions, then just please put them in a Q&A box or in the chat box. Unfortunately, this is the only way we can interact right now, just because of the large number of people in the class. In our regular class or in your MBA program, if the class is virtual, you are going to be able to interact two ways. So you can actually unmute yourself, be on the camera, we can see you, you can ask a question. Right now, with this large webinar, you can only interact by a chat box or Q&A box. So if you have a question, just please throw it in there. We're going to stay probably for 2 or 3 minutes. If there are not going to be any more questions, then we just like to invite you to connect with us and explore the different paths that are available on the GMSB website, explore the different study programs that we have available at our Admit Master website. Let's have this discussion going. Our goal is really for you to make the right decisions, because this is your career, right? And that's why, even though you are going to be coming to our program, we would love to have you in the program so that you can study for the GMAT with us. If our program is not the right choice for you, we're going to tell you. And the same thing with the John Molson School of Business. So let us know if there is anything we can do to help. And if not, we hope to see you. We hope to see you soon. We hope to see you in our verbal refresher class and in our live classes, and hope that you can submit your application and start connecting with the John Molson School of Business, and start understanding what is that right career path for you, because that's really where it all starts. So if you'd like to do a one-on-one consultation with me as well, then please you can go on our website, book a free consultation. It is completely free. We'll connect for about 20 minutes. And not just for the GMAT, but also most importantly, is where are you taking your career, and is this the right step for you? Right? And when is this the right step? How do you actually approach it? I'm happy to help you there as well. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks very much for joining us. I see that we have no more questions. So in case we don't connect before, we hope that you have a great holiday season. I know these are challenging times for all of us. So if you can take some time, perhaps spend some time with your family, maybe if it's even virtual, and just take care of each other and have a safe and happy as we could this holiday season. We are going to get through this, and we'll see the other side, and thinking about what's coming in the future. And I know for many of our clients, really thinking about that MBA gives them a perspective to understand that this is all temporary. The challenges we have here are temporary. There is something to look forward to in the future. So perhaps that's how you can approach this whole experience, especially during this challenging holiday season as well. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Hanukkah, Diwali, or whatever you are celebrating, and we hope to see you shortly.
Happy holidays to all. Thank you so much for being here.
Take care.